Aaron Lutzi, are we back, dude?
You're back.
We are so back.
It's
Do you
happening.
do you think people thought we had a falling out or something
Gosh, I
due
hope
to my
not.
absence?
No, I
I
think
got I got pushed out.
it's very clear that you are a busy person. You've been on every corner of the globe in the last like 2 months, and yeah,
I know, and meanwhile, you again keep putting out so many bangers on the podcast feed that I feel stupid even returning to my seat here as your co-host, Aaron, because you've just been on such a heater again. Congratulations, bravo, and thank you for all the entertainment, insight, and education that you provided here on Second Nature in my absence, buddy.
thanks, man. There's a handful more still in the hopper, which I guess will have come out by the time this comes out. But yeah, I like having a little bit of a backlog now, just because it's about to get really crazy for both of us. You had a wild start to the year, but I think as the sun starts to peak out, I'm gonna be able to ride my mountain bike a little bit. It's not gonna be just like muddy trails anymore. So having a little extra room in our schedules would be pretty handy. But yeah.
Couple little pieces of inside baseball for our listeners here. For the forthcoming Kate Courtney episode, it was on my calendar and I jumped on last minute. And Aaron was clearly surprised that I was in attendance. And I was like, hey, do you want to do this one solo? He's like, well, I've got a plan. I was like, all right, dude, I'm punching out. You do this. I don't want to screw up your flow on the Kate Courtney episode, which I can't wait to listen to. And it was so good to hear Retsik's perspective on that here as a companion piece to the Kate Courtney episode, which will be coming out soon.
Yeah.
And then secondly, we got to give a shout out to our boy Brett Jorgensen as part of this inside baseball convo. You want to give him a quick bit of kudos?
Yeah, Brett really jumped in and bailed me out in a pretty major way because, Dylan, as you know, I've edited all of the podcasts up until I think episode 78, which it's a lot of work. I mean, podcasts I think are deceptively time consuming already because you've got to do the scheduling. Sometimes there's a pre-call that happens, then the pod itself takes about 90 minutes to record, give or take, and then after the laptop closes, then I go or went into editing mode where it was just cleaning up the audio, tidying things up. I wasn't making any major overhauls, but still it's another hour or so just to get through that, where you have the video and the audio, and then you go into making the thumbnail and you work on the show notes. There's just a lot that comes with the podcast that I think most people actually don't really understand. It seems like, well, you just talk to somebody for an hour and you're good, right? That's not including posting on LinkedIn, or researching, or any of those other things that we do. And one of the biggest things that was taking up the most time is actually editing every single one of the podcasts. So Brett jumped in, raised his hand, and basically learned to edit from scratch. We did a lot of back and forth where we are kind of showing him how we do every single episode, and he picked it up pretty much flawlessly. In fact, I would be surprised if anybody could tell a difference between the first 79 episodes and every episode since then. I'd be relatively shocked, because he's done such a good job getting it done, and it's taken a lot of pressure and time off of my schedule. So super appreciate what Brett's doing.
Brett is basically Ryan Thrower's protege.
Yeah.
Ryan tags him in on certain free trail things here. Ryan sort of gave him an opportunity to hone his craft a little bit by picking up a little second nature work. And we are very grateful to Brett Jorgensen from Seattle, Washington, for stepping in. Lutzi, let's talk, bro. We got a lot to catch up on here. I feel like what we should do is probably just kind of catch up on what we've both been up to with our respective businesses. I think the big major piece of news out of my universe was TrailCon. I know you wanted to talk about that. Should we just launch into the partnership, or where do you want to start?
Yeah, I think there's a ton of big TrailCon updates. We haven't really talked about it other than, you sort of needling me about not being there last year and getting in on the schedule for this year. But other than that, like, we haven't really talked about TrailCon since last year. So let's go like as much as you can possibly share with the audience, because I think this is like pretty interesting to hear.
So the big piece of news that we announced last Thursday was that On is coming on board as the presenting sponsor of TrailCon here in 2025. We are expanding to 2 full days of panels, keynotes, activations, group runs, happy hours, vendor village. And so, we're really trying to create this bridge between Broken Arrow and Western States to create this North American 10-day celebration of the beautiful sport of trail running. And TrailCon, we think, can play an important role in being part of that 10-day celebration and being that bridge between two iconic North American events. And really, by virtue of that fact, is we kind of need it to be longer, and we think it should be longer. There's so much to do, so much to talk about, so much to accomplish that 2 full days will probably feel short when all is said and done. But from our perspective, what expanding the event meant, obviously, is that we had a ton of expenses, right? And at the end of the day, at least for now, TrailCon is meant to be a give back thing. It's meant to be something that is a service to the community. It's again in the spirit of things that we've done with a lot with Free Trail of just like, this should exist. Let's do it, and we'll figure it out later, like how to make it all pencil out and make sense. And obviously, we have great partners on the event. Brendan Madigan, who's been a guest here on the podcast, and Doug Emsley, who's going to be a future guest on the podcast and who I was just hanging out with in Boston over the last couple of days. In year one, Doug basically funded our Taste of TrailCon event, which was a single afternoon. We lost a ton of money, had zero sponsors. It was totally free and open to the public. It was an investment in priming the pump for the official launch here in 2025. All that being said, long wind up to say is, to put something like this on, you need the support of brands. And having that backing by On is so critical, it can't be overstated. And announcing it this week felt like, a great validation of our original vision and bringing this to life. Doug and I have been talking about this for 3 years at this point, and Brendan was thinking about it sort of in parallel, and we all sort of joined forces around this time last year, or maybe a little bit longer ago. So anyway, big moment for us though. On one of the most exciting, fastest growing brands in the world is the title sponsor of TrailCon in our official launch, and really the first iteration of it. Feels like a big deal to me.
Yeah, it is a big deal, man. And how cool to just see them jump in and see the value in it. And I think, one of the things that we talked a little bit about is this idea of value creation versus value extraction. And I think one thing that makes TrailCon extra special is this concept of value creation. Everyone that's going to attend this event is going to get a ton out of it. And I think partnering with something that's creating massive value for the entire industry is a place where On should probably be. And many other brands should likely follow suit to bring value. I think it's sort of tricky, right? Because just like Second Nature, you are speaking to, in some cases, a lot of On's competitors and bringing value to their competitors and sharpening up their competitors in the same way that here, to be, to have a footwear partner for this pod would be interesting because there are so many other competitive people that are also getting value out of this. But I do think that like their presence throughout that week is something that's pretty necessary. And do you feel like, Broken Arrow and Western States being partnered with other footwear brands, this is On's sort of shot at showing up in Tahoe that week?
To a degree, probably yes. The timing is good based on the proximity to both Broken Arrow and Western States, and that's really the reason why we do TrailCon at the time that we do. It's opportunistic in that so much of the industry is already there. So why don't we make a event to actually get people in the same room rather than everybody being in various hotel rooms and Airbnbs scattered around the North Lake Tahoe area? And let's make progress on some stuff. But yeah, at the same time, On is using TrailCon as a platform to launch their new trail running super shoe in June of 2025, which is a big deal,
Wait,
right?
did you just drop an exclusive?
No.
Oh, okay.
Well, yeah. I mean, we sort of talked about it in the announcement pod that went up on the Free Trail feed. So anyway, we will be having group runs there where people are going to be able to experience this new product. But going back to what you said earlier, like, yeah, at the end of the day, these brands are in competition with one another, but for example, I mean, going back to when you and I first started talking about TrailCon on Second Nature, the original concept was let's do the sea otter of trail running. And at Sea Otter, every single brand is there. And it's an important moment for the whole industry. And yes, even though those brands are in competition with one another, there's value in being able to just get everybody together in the same place to sort of, celebrate the culture and the spirit of mountain biking in Sea Otter's case and trail running in TrailCon's case. And yeah, at the end of the day, we hope to have the opportunity for brands big and small to show off their product, to tell their story a little bit, and hopefully resonate with a trail running audience and consumer. But we're not thinking about like how these things compete with one another, and we hope that brands aren't necessarily thinking that way either. In all the conversations we've had as it pertains to sponsorship, we've emphasized the fact that we're trying to make this a positive something for everybody. And really, just based on the economics of it, we need lots of brands involved. And um, I think people are reasonable enough to understand that.
Absolutely. How's my photo booth coming along? Is the
That was
concepts
a good idea. You want to fill the audience in?
so I have this idea for TrailCon because again, it's all about value creation. What are the different ways you could bring value to all the attendees at the event? And one of the things that really strikes me because I have to ask people for headshots all the time for all of our Second Nature YouTube titles or thumbnails is that a lot of people don't have fresh headshots. And so one of the ways that you could bring a ton of value to everybody that's there, what if you had a little station where everybody could get a handful of headshots that they could use for their, LinkedIn, for their upcoming Second Nature interview, whatever it is, including myself, because I've been on a couple other podcasts recently and they're like, hey, can you send me a headshot? And I'm like, I don't really here you go, like just random photo of me, but I don't have actually a real pro headshot. And so that
Neither
would
do I.
be massively helpful.
Hmm.
And imagine like in between the different, sessions and stuff, if you could just slide out for a minute and get a handful of selects and then just keep it moving, I think that'd be huge. Maybe Second Nature sponsors the photo booth or something, but have like a real portrait photographer there shooting it could be really helpful for every single person there. Like there's nobody who wouldn't take advantage of that, I think.
Yeah, no, it's a great idea, and I hope we can bring that to life. And if so, yeah, it makes sense to have it be the Second Nature portrait booth. We can get Ryan behind the lens, or Tony with a Sony, or somebody with some real skills to blast out some dope portraits. Hey, let's talk about the Holmberg
Yeah.
idea,
Yeah, yeah.
because I think our audience might find this interesting, just given the fact that they've developed a great relationship with our boy Steve. But you texted me like, "Hey, Steve's got an idea for TrailCon." Effectively, go ahead. You can
Oh
go
no,
do
this
this.
the
Yeah.
the idea came right before we recorded the podcast that's going to go live tomorrow, which is basically consumer and market insight 101. We did kind of a explainer episode with him. And I think one thing that makes him really special is that he really focuses in on starting with the consumer first. We get so fired up on all kinds of ideas about product or about events or about athletes or whatever. He always goes back to the consumer. And when you look back at the 2025 predictions pod that we did with him, every single insight and observation and prediction he made always started with the consumer. And so he wanted to bring that discussion to TrailCon. I'll let you pick up from there.
Okay. So Steve and I talked about this after you made that connection, and immediately I was like, "This is brilliant. This is so brilliant." And the original concept for the first session at TrailCon was going to have David Callahan from Ultra Sign Up, who we need to get on the pod, by the
Yeah.
way. He's a really great thinker and maybe my favorite follow on LinkedIn, my favorite social media platform. And Callahan is the CEO of Ultra Sign Up, so the largest race registration platform that sits on top of a rich database of what's happening in terms of event participation in the sport. So we were going to have Callahan put together a slideshow that sort of started with the state of events in 2025 based on the data through the lens of ultrasign up. So then my brain went to, after this Holmberg discussion, was what if we paired Callahan and Holmberg together? So Callahan does 15, 20 minutes on the state of events and participation. Steve does a 15, 20 minutes on the state of the consumer and therefore brands. Sort of call it 30 to 40 minutes of like a slideshow where they are sort of teamed up, probably Callahan and then Holmberg back to back. And then myself, Steve, Callahan sit on stage for another 15 or 20 minutes to go one layer deeper, potentially opening it up to Q&A. But I thought it was a really great way to start TrailCon, especially, right? Just like establish the state of the sport as it pertains to event participation, as it pertains to the consumer, brands. What is market research telling us about what's happening in the sport right now through the, very competent and charismatic personalities of David Callahan and Steve Holmberg. And so that's how we're thinking about starting things off, Lucy.
I think it's good. I think it sets the tone for the rest of the discussions. There will likely be some nugget of wisdom or lens that you kind of put the rest of, your thoughts through for the rest of TrailCon based on that first one. So if there's any session worth attending, that's going to be how to think about everything else we're going to talk about over the next 2 days, I think.
So I talked to Callahan about this last week, and then I texted Steve. And we also had a meeting with the partners, with Doug and Brendan. And I texted Steve and I said, "Get your PowerPoint ready, bro." Sunglass emojis.
He teaches actual classes. He's a
I know.
professor.
I can't wait. He's gonna crush it. He's gonna knock it out of the park.
Wait till you hear this Consumer Insights 101. He had this, I think that the title of the podcast is "The Single Phrase That Helps Brands Innovate."
What?
Like, he killed it. He killed it.
Good tease. Good cliffhanger.
Well, it'll already be out by the time people listen to this one, so
Yeah.
they'll know what that single phrase is. Or if you somehow missed it and you're listening to us talk about it now, go back and listen to that podcast because it's a banger, absolute banger.
Couple other things just to tease for the audience on the TrailCon front that I think are going to be fun. Number one, we're all going to have an opportunity to try this new shoe from On. And the sort of whole day on Tuesday, the first day of TrailCon, is going to kick off with what I'm calling the industry shred. So hopefully we get like everybody from the industry together. We throw on these dope shoes. We can go for a nice little 60-minute run around Palisades, Tahoe. So that's going to be fun. And I think it's just a great opportunity to bump elbows with people, practice the sport that we love before kind of going in and trying to get some work done through, the dialogue and panels and stuff that we're going to be doing during TrailCon. We are working on, Lutzi, a very big keynote session that we'll talk all about here on the podcast once we can get that confirmed. We're also going to be having a dope like networking happy hour event on Tuesday night. And on Wednesday night, I don't want to spoil it yet. I don't think I'm allowed to make an announcement, but on Wednesday night we're going to introduce something that's going to be very cool to trail running. Again, one of these things that exists in every other sport that we want to bring to our great sport.
Ooh, oh, okay, I know what this is.
You
that's
know
cool.
what it is.
Yeah,
you know what it is.
Okay, yeah, no, that's going to be a cool one. I can't wait
and
for that.
Very importantly, Aaron Lutzi's going to be in attendance, and I think we have you penciled in to lead 2 panels at this point. One on each day. We'll we'll refine that and
tell me what I'm doing at TrailCon.
Yeah, we don't quite know yet, but something in your zone of genius, let's say,
Okay.
Sports marketing, athlete marketing, content creation, the intersection of brands and athletes.
I got a few things to talk about.
Right.
I think.
Why don't you me like Holmberg did, and then we what do you want to talk about?
That's a big question. I think there's a lot of different ways we could probably take that one. The thing that I'm the most excited about is really having deeper conversations with brands about the what and why behind their athlete programs. And I think that's probably like the bullseye of my center of genius of like, okay, we did things a specific way at Red Bull, but not every brand needs to go that same way. Here are the different ways we could talk about working with athletes. Is it awareness? Is it, consideration? Is it conversion? What are the reasons that you're doing it for? And can we be really specific? And could your athletes that you're sponsoring tell me exactly why they're sponsored by you? I think that's a
Yes.
really interesting question to ask a brand.
Yep.
Do they know what they're there for? And if it's just like, oh, they're fast and they win stuff, I'm scratching my head a little bit at this point. There's got
Yep.
to be more to it because you're not going to get your full, value out of that partnership if you don't know why you're sponsoring an athlete, and even more so if they don't know why they're sponsored.
Yep.
And hey, Red Bull could be guilty of this too. Not every athlete knows why, and part of that was on purpose. It was by design that we wanted them to continue to act naturally and not feel forced to do the things. But at the same time, when the partnership ended and they're like, "What did I do wrong?" then that's a problem too. So I think you have to
Yep.
find kind of that middle ground. I'm really interested in having more conversations with people from brands around exactly that so that we can continue to design more opportunities for brands to work together with athletes and creators. I think right now there have been sort of best practices that people have just kind of copied and pasted, but not really understood why. And I think we could get sharper as an industry around the why of athlete sponsorship. Maybe that's my TED talk
Yes.
or my
It
TrailCon
reminds
talk.
me it reminds me of Patrick Crawford's newsletter from last week, Zero Draft, where it was like titled, I think
Creators are
the
the new founders.
yeah.
I've got it
So
pulled up right here.
like maybe one of Lutzie's sessions could be the rise of the athlete creator or something like that,
Yeah.
where you could do a little soliloquy on your philosophy about content creation being the center of the flywheel for building an athletic career, but also bring on cool people who've been able to execute that playbook.
Yeah. I'd love to
Yeah,
have I'd love actually to have Patrick on that panel too. That would be really interesting because
smart.
he's somebody that I've looked up to for a really long time. I didn't even
I loved that episode with him.
yeah. Yeah,
Very good.
that could have gone on twice as long. We were nerding out on like a very high level, but I think, yeah, having him on a panel like that because he's seen it from sort of the agency and execution side as well as the strategy side, he's got a lot of really interesting input. And for that article that you referenced that he wrote, he and I actually spent some time on the phone. I gave him some thoughts about it. I talked about this idea of how, because he had kind of written it around that slow ventures announcement where they were going to start investing in creators and stuff. And he was asking me sort of the difference between what does athlete sponsorship look like versus this. And the way that I kind of talked about it, like, well, the intention of athlete partnerships typically is about value extraction. How can I use that athlete to get someone to give me money for a product? Whereas the way I saw the slow ventures thing was about value creation. How can we help this person get to this next level where they're creating more value than they already are? We've already demonstrated, or they've already demonstrated that they are creating value. How can we help them create more? And I think one of the things that I had talked to Patrick about specifically was that, there's not a lot of great examples. I think, Meat Eater, and there's a gardening example that are out there right
Epic
now
gardening.
that I think Churning Group picked up. Those are really
Both of those are churning.
right. And those are the examples, but there are not that many examples of that. And I think that when you are presented with what would you do with $1 million, you probably haven't thought about that if you're a creator too often. Like, yeah, that'd be great. What
We
would I
talked
do?
about this on the pod. So have you talked about the creator fund from Slow Ventures on the pod yet? Should
Only
we talk
in
about it?
Yeah, it's been in the Slack channel quite a bit, but
Yeah.
we haven't really talked about it much on the pod. Go for it.
It's funny how much it's like penetrated our communities, isn't it? Like Slow Ventures is a quintessential Silicon Valley tech seed stage investing firm,
Mhm.
right? Like not necessarily something that traditionally has touched the outdoor industry. And so I just think it's interesting how many people in our community, and certainly in the Second Nature Slack group, how much that announcement has been shared. I have shared this with you, Lucy, and we sort of talked around it on the podcast, but Slow Ventures reached out to us at Free Trail before they made the announcement of this new fund. And like you just said, and as I mentioned on the podcast, I spoke to Megan Lightcap, who we should potentially get on the show. I bet she would come on and talk about this whole philosophy. She basically said to me, like, if you had extra money, what would you do with it? And I was sort of like, I'm not really sure, but like it's definitely an interesting thought experiment. And this was in the episode that we did about what business are you trying to build, right? Or what business are you building? And I don't know. I think one of the points that we made was if we don't know what you would take money for, you probably shouldn't. But also, like, what a good and valuable thought experiment it is for people in our positions who are kind of building these creator led media platforms to think about, hey, if I did have the backing of an investment fund, what would I potentially use that funding on?
Yeah, and well, the thing is too, again, going back to my point of like there's two examples and maybe you could just copy paste that, but there needs to be like 20 examples where there's different ways that you can be successful because every single content creator out there does it a different way and has been successful in all these various ways. And I think that the more examples you see of this, the better outcomes there will be for everyone, but also people will start building in that direction because I'm not building in a direction currently where $1 million would actually advance anything that I'm doing other than my bank account, But if I knew, oh, here are 20 different ways I could potentially build, because really the way that most creators have thought about growth is just in the number of followers that you have on whatever platform. That's sort of like that's the summit, right? Like, okay, well, I want to get to 1 million subscribers on YouTube, or I want to get 100,000 followers on Instagram. There's sort of like a then what? Like, I guess I keep stacking more on top of that, but I don't really know. I guess I can have merch. I guess I could do an event. And so I think that Slow could basically create an opportunity where people actually figure out what that next summit is supposed to be. And it's going to look different for a lot of different people. And so they're basically helping develop this entire economy of what stage two looks like for the creator economy. And there will likely be other venture funds that come in and start to draft off of what Slow is doing. And again, to be clear, Slow is not the first venture fund to do something like this with creators. And I would even say that probably the YouTube Partner Program is sort of the original creator fund, right? Hey, keep making good content, keep building your community. We're going to pay you a little bit of ad rates to sort of subsidize your growth. And you can make money by making content. So you have like this first burst of it, and you can say, like, okay, well, Mr. Beast was able to get to this point because he took all that ad revenue and kept investing it back into his channel. And then now he's got a game show on Amazon and whatever else. So that was like, okay, well, there's a way to go. I don't know. I just think like the more opportunities we have to build businesses in different ways, the more inspiration we get and the more you could potentially look at that, because it's not realistic for me to build up Super Rider to 1 million and then get a game show on Amazon, as fun as that might actually be. I don't think that's realistic for basically anybody else. So having Slow come in and develop out all these other best practices is going to benefit the entire creator economy, I think.
Well, we should try and get Megan on the show to talk more about that investment thesis and philosophy. And I think it does have a fairly novel structure to it in that they're taking like 10% of a holding company and then have exposure to anything the creator does in the future, rather than, for example, a creator's launching a skincare brand and the investor is only taking a piece of that skincare brand. Slow is trying to have a holistic view and exposure to anything that a creator might do. So again, I'm not well versed enough to speak about it super intelligently, but it would be a really fun conversation to have. And I think it probably is only a matter of time until we see them close their first deal with a business that you and I are both familiar with in the outdoor space. It reminds me, Aaron, of something that I sent to you that maybe we could riff on here for 2 seconds here while we're on the subject of the episode that we did a couple months ago of what business are you building. I came across this Substack, a guy named Nat Eliason, who I've followed on Twitter for a long time. From what I understand, he's, I think, just kind of like a creative minded business person who's done a bunch of different things in building internet first businesses. Like he wrote a book about basically spending a couple years just going deep on cryptocurrency. I haven't read it yet, but it's called The Crypto Confidential. He's also published a couple of other books. I think he considers himself a writer first. I don't know that much about him other than I've followed him on Twitter for a little while and find some of the stuff that he puts out fairly interesting. But he put out a tweet last week that was basically like, don't mistake a cash business for an equity business, that went sort of viral. So he expanded on it in his newsletter. And I just want to read the first 4 paragraphs here real quick. You can respond and we'll see if there's anything interesting here to riff on. But again, I think this is in line with the conversation that we've had about knowing what type of business you're trying to build. So it's titled Fast Cash versus Slow Equity, Knowing What You're Building. And it starts One mistake I've made in entrepreneurship is not understanding the difference between a cash business and an equity business. A cash business is like an ATM. It spits out money reliably, often immediately, but may have limited long term value. You might replace your salary quite quickly with a cash business, but it's often easier to compete with, so someone could come eat your lunch and it might be hard to scale past a certain revenue number. An equity business is more like planting a tree. It often takes considerably longer to replace your salary, but once you do, those earnings are more durable, and the business is often worth quite a bit on its own. The mistake I've made and that you want to avoid is expecting cash business payouts from an equity business and expecting equity bonus growth. And expecting equity business growth from a cash business. Sorry, I didn't do a great job reading there, but you get the point of like, yeah, are you building a cash business to just replace your salary quickly, or are you planting a tree and, probably not going to see immediate return on this for a long time, but something that has bigger moats, is harder to compete with, and therefore has much higher upside?
Yeah, totally fair. And I think that's the taking a step back and actually identifying what it is that you are building. I think the toughest thing also is when you're building an equity business, expecting it to have that. And I think that was sort of one of the big realizations I had. I think that creation is sort of this asymmetric upside of when it goes, it goes. And one thing that also makes creation really interesting is that it's mostly levered on your taste. It's not so much about the, like an AI couldn't just replace this podcast because there's so much taste that goes into developing what we're putting out. And I think, yeah, those cash businesses, like he said, someone could come and eat your lunch, but who's going to put in the reps to do uh, 87 episodes of a podcast with zero return? Because yeah, we're doing it because we want this to exist, but we also have the taste to know who should be on the podcast, what should we talk about on the podcast, how should we put it out into the world, like what should we do with it. And I think that's a really important thing. It's like, yeah, how do you balance these things out though? Because I think the toughest part is that we're building this equity thing potentially here, but also like you got to keep the lights on too. And so having to balance that out somehow by working on a side project that will bring in something while you continue to focus in on the majority of your effort on that longer term thing.
The reason I think it's interesting is because to me, the distinction between cash business and equity business is like an equity business can exist without the founder, right? And so I don't know with Free Trail, for example, whether I'm building a cash business or an equity business. Like I don't know if Free Trail could exist without me and our founding team. In other words, like I doubt there would be a situation where we could sell free trail because people would recognize that it would not be worth whatever we would ask for it without us. You know what I mean?
I mean, I think you could protect your downside by starting to invest. And I know I've told you this more than a few times, but like build up a handful of other voices that, and you have other people that have done stuff, but like, can you do more with them to sort of balance it out? Because right now, that's also the problem is that you're limited by, and look, man, like you are all over the place. You're in Boston, you're in New Zealand, you're in Arizona, like you can't go any harder, and especially as your kiddo gets older, that's going to be way worse, and you're going to need to build that up. So you either can start now and start investing in that additional personality who can run it, or you can just rinse yourself for the next couple of years until you potentially implode.
No, it's something I think about. Yeah, I don't know. But the trend in media though is that it's about the creator. It's not about the brand. Like eh, for example, it would be hard for me to recruit somebody to come kind of do the trailgating stuff so that I could stay home with my family who couldn't just start their own YouTube channel and do it on their own. I think there's some benefit to, I don't know, having the distribution or whatever that we've built up at this point, but also I think just the macro trend in media is that it's way less about the brand. It's way more about who's on.
I mean, I think it's not an overnight thing. Like you can't bring somebody on and then like dip out, but you could have somebody as a co-host for the trailgating stuff for the next 2 years, and then start to rotate them in, start to give them more responsibility, start to grow their stuff. And you absolutely run the risk of them being like, you know what, I could just start my own thing. But I do think that the moat that you have in place with trailgating, with the podcast, with everything else is pretty deep at this point, where I think there is a lot of equity in free trail, and also the access that you have not just to athletes but to events and everything else that you're doing. But I do think it's a longer term thing. Like I don't think that the audience would respond well to you just like flipping somebody in right now. But if you took the time to,
Yeah, like Corinne, for example, we could easily, I could stay home and send Corinne to something
yeah,
eventually, and people would certainly tune in, and it would feel like a free trail voice. You know what I mean? Which is important. It's just occurring to me though, like as part of this slow thesis, that's got to be something that they're really thinking about. Is in order for them to see a return on their investment, they would need paths to exit these businesses, which means they would need paths for the creators to sell things. So I wonder how they're thinking about it. It's a question that we could ask Megan on the pod if we could get her.
that would be a really fun conversation just to have anyway. I mean, I just think also about like the other things that you want to put your time into. I mean, this podcast is an example. You're busy. You're so busy doing all this other stuff. How could you put yourself in a position where you could be on this podcast more frequently? Like Ian emailed us a couple weeks ago. Like I'm interested to see what things you give up as you move forward, as things get even more
Who
hectic.
emailed us that?
Ian McGregor from Scratch.
Oh,
We were
right.
talking about the secret project, but he was like, I'll be interested to see like what stuff you hold on to and what stuff you let go.
God, I love those guys so
Yeah,
much.
they're pretty great.
So good.
I guess my point was just that you have to start planning to put yourself in a position to let go of certain things, but you can get them ramped up to a point where it wouldn't be catastrophic to let someone else jump in and take the reins, because that would open the opportunity for you to work on another thing that was equally, if not more exciting. And I think that's where Slow would come in of saying like, cool, you got this like up and running. Now what's the next thing you're going to build? Like they're not going to give you $1 million just to keep doing only the thing that you're doing. They're going to want you to expand out in that conversation.
Secret project, the old CKP. That would be the an interesting thing for Slow. And I did mention it to Megan when we talked. Um, so one for some reason this just it brought up something that I've been doing recently that's a fun little tactical thing that might be fun to talk about here. Part of the thing that I'm really trying to do in 2025 is improve my time management. And a thing I've been trying to implement recently with some success is no meetings on Monday or Tuesday. Monday, Tuesday is my day. If we're doing stuff internally, I can talk about that. I can record podcasts, obviously, which is sort of the fun, creative, and most important work that I do that often I get sidetracked from just by virtue of the fact that I'm on meetings. And Mondays and Tuesdays have, for the last couple of years, just been so freaking hectic for me, where just end up things get pushed at the end of the week before, so that Monday and Tuesday are just freaking fire drills, and then I end up behind all week. And so that's kind of the whole purpose behind it, is like, okay, we're going to keep Monday and Tuesday quiet, creative, productive, no fire drill, so that, by the end of the week, it feels like, or by the middle of the week, it doesn't feel like I'm just trying to play catch up, but that I've got the important things done. And then I can prioritize the other meetings and stuff that I need to take based on the weight or importance that they command. In other words, yeah, just like making the main thing, carving out the earliest part of the week for the most important stuff.
I think you and I both struggle with this because I think we are people pleasers when it comes to fulfilling requests. And a lot of people want to get time with us, which is fair. And I think both of us really appreciate that because there have always been big opportunities in taking those random meetings where something comes together and you're like, whoa, no way. And the last thing I want to do is say no. But also, when you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else. And I'm sort of forcing myself to go into this monk mode in the next couple weeks where I have to say no unless it's something that I really truly value. And even that, things that I do value, I can feel the universe pulling me when I'm going out to film and then someone that I really want to talk to calls me as I'm backing out of the driveway to go film, and I have to like, nope, I cannot do this right now because this is going to be a 30-minute call that I desperately want to have, but it's not the right time because I have to get this stuff done. And I think that being more strategic about my year, thinking about what are the biggest things that I need to accomplish this year. I need to get back on my long form content for Super Rider. I have another big project for Super Rider coming up that's about to be finalized. And obviously, this podcast, like those are the three big rocks for the year. And I have to make space for those things. And one of the things from a strategic standpoint, we're building a bigger backlog of content for Second Nature so that we can zoom out, and if we can't record every single day or whatever or a couple times a week, then that's okay because we're doing all the other things that we need to do to go out and learn the lessons that we come back to the channel to talk about. I'm thinking a lot about the actual business and like what is actually moving the needle. How am I building equity versus cash? I think is an interesting thing to be thinking about, but being more strategic. I've been really stuck in this executional loop for a long time where it's just been like, just do the work, stay consistent, and you'll be totally fine. It's all going to work out. But I think that also I haven't made the progress that I thought I was going to make by just being consistent. And so taking a step out and saying, okay, strategically, what are the 3 or 4 things that I could do this year that would make this year a success? How do I make sure that I give myself enough room to do those things? And then I'll add everything else in on top of that where I can, when I can. But I have to prioritize that kind of stuff and make room for it and be okay with saying no to stuff or hitting pause on certain things that aren't delivering and really focusing in on the strategy. Because, of course, I can execute, I can edit videos all day long. Having somebody like Brett come in who could edit Second Nature pods just gave me back like 5 hours a week, you know because why should I be, that's not my, I'm good at editing but it's not my zone of genius when it comes to like running a business. And so bringing someone in to help out with that is going to be huge. And now that I've gotten one of those down, I'm like, oh wait, oh, that opened up a big door. Okay, what else, what's on that same level of taking up lots of time but really not my best use of time, and really just being ruthless about the way I prioritize.
Yeah, it's such a good point. Such a good point. Where do we want to go next? Obviously, we got BPC to get to.
We'll get there. But there's one thing I want to talk about because we don't have to spend a lot of time on this, but I think that in connection with the slow ventures discussion and the zero draft article that Patrick wrote, there's one other really important thing that I think if you haven't listened to this or people on this listening to the pod haven't listened to, there is an interview on Colin and Samir with Jack Conte, who's the CEO of Patreon. I don't know how familiar you are with this guy, but he is a wizard. His Digital Spaghetti channel is one of my favorite channels on YouTube, actually. But they have this. He did this speech a while ago that was called "The Death of the Follower," and Colin and Samir, for those who don't know, are basically the second nature for the creator economy. How's that? You like that?
Definitely.
I think they may actually. I'm not sure if they're connected to Slow Ventures at all, but they work with Smooth Media, who I know is lightly connected to Slow. And this discussion that they had kind of goes all over the place. This is one of those podcasts that I need to like sit down and listen to again with a notebook because there's so many nuggets getting dropped throughout this entire conversation. And they're talking a lot about the algorithm. They're talking about community building. They're talking about business building. They're going all over the place. One of the most interesting things that they said in the very beginning of the pod, they were like, name one other, speaking about the algorithm specifically and how the death of the follower, it's like people don't see everything that they signed up to see. And that's sort of a problem for the creator. And Jack, and again, he's preaching Patreon's, gospel for sure. But the point that he makes is like, name any other business that they can't connect with their consumers. Like, it's not how it works. Like, your business is you having this connection and finding your customers. And the creator economy, the biggest issue with all these algorithms, everything, is that you can't find your customers, or maybe they see 10% of what you're putting out there. And one of the things that really made me think about was sort of the popularity of newsletters specifically, and how, a lot of our audience is actually on Substack. And that is one of the few mediums right now where everybody sees it. Maybe the only other one is podcasts. Patrick Crawford had another article about, I think it was called like the case for ignoring the algorithm and why people are locking into long podcasts and newsletters. And I think it's sort of this really cool thing from both sides where I'm going to put something out and you're going to either read it or listen to it. And that's the original agreement between creator and, subscriber, whatever. And I think maybe it is the audience sort of reacting to the algorithm of like, maybe they're frustrated too. Like, hey, I signed up to listen to whatever these guys had to say, and I can't find them. I'm missing their stuff. What's a place I could go to where I could get that back? And you've got newsletters and podcasts as a way to do that. Imagine how difficult it would be if you were trying to listen to podcasts and the algorithm got involved. Surely there'd be a little bit more discovery, which would be
Oh,
great. But like, how
nightmare.
frustrated would you be if it was like, hey, do you hear the new Second Nature
Dude,
podcast? Like,
like
no.
I need to listen to this, and I find myself really frustrated with the algorithm. I spend very little time on Instagram anymore because it just doesn't feel the way that it used to. I actually heard, I don't know if this is totally true, you might know, that Meta had floated a trial balloon about potentially creating a standalone app for Instagram Reels to basically be TikTok so that Instagram could be Instagram again,
Hmm.
which to me felt like them recognizing that a lot of the people who came to love that platform have become disenchanted with it based on exactly what you're describing of like not seeing the things that you have signed up to see, and instead just your main feed is filled with like the suggested follower type content. I don't like it. I don't like it. Maybe I'm a boomer, maybe I'm old, but it's just not for me. That's why I spend all my scroll time on LinkedIn and Twitter, because those are places where I learn and where I see the things from the people that I have subscribed or followed.
I think that's sort of something that Instagram could do, where if you go to Twitter, there's two tabs, right? There's the for you and then the following. And you can go back and forth between the two, where if you want to have some discovery, which on Twitter, I don't know, man. But, like I like the fact that I can go to a following only feed and see only the people that I chose to follow. I would love to have a version of that on Instagram, and that sort of solves it right there.
Totally, yeah. Just like let me opt out of this TikTok
Yeah.
algorithm that they're trying to copy.
Or even adjust the ratio.
Yeah.
Hey, my DMs are loaded with my friends sending me crazy stuff that I wouldn't have found any other way. And I love seeing some of those videos. I just got bombarded actually. There was this robot video that showed up where they taught a robot how to ride a bike, and it like jumped 3 feet in the air and then dropped off and then it was balancing, which made me actually really worried that maybe they were using my tutorial videos to train AI, but whatever. But I wouldn't have found that, I got it through somebody saw it in a suggested thing and sent it to me. I was definitely not following some Turkish drone making account, but it was a crazy video. And so if I could just dial it where, hey, I want to have a little bit of discoverability, but I still really I followed these people for a reason. I think that's interesting to think about what that might look like of having the two different tabs of following and for
Yeah,
you.
because that's what Twitter has. It
Hmm.
has the traditional, chronological or reverse chronological feed.
Yeah.
Plus, it has the For You feed. I spend zero time in my Twitter For You feed. I just use.
Oh, it's a mess. It's
I'm
an absolute
sure. Oh my
mess.
God. I mean, that platform has become crazy, but I still learn so much on Twitter.
Yeah.
So, anyway, fun convo there, Lucy. I've got one other thing before we go to BPC. Did you have something?
No, I'm just
Really quick.
that Jack. I'll put the link in the show notes for this pod, but we could have a
I got to listen to that.
whole
I'll listen to
podcast
that.
based on that because it's just like
Hell yeah.
one thing after another. I mean, these are three of the best dudes in all of content creation just going to town,
I got to
and
look up this
it's
Jack Conte guy.
oh
I'm
yeah,
sure. Yeah.
he's smart.
Typically, what I do when I find people like that is I then binge literally every single thing they've ever done. Like Megan Lightcap, for example, from Slow Ventures. I had started following her like 2, 3 years ago when I learned about, what they were up to. And so when she DM'd me on Twitter, actually, it was to chat about the Creator Fund. I was like, holy smokes. Because she introduced herself. I was like, Megan, oh my God, I've been following you forever. I've literally listened to every single interview you've ever done. So that Jack Conti's going to be the next guy I do that with.
You know, the thing that you're going to love about Jack Conti is just the point that you and I always make is about being a practitioner. This guy is a practitioner. So,
Yeah, because he's making his own content and he's the CEO of Patreon.
well, before he became the CEO of Patreon, he was in a band. He's still in a band, but he was solving for an issue that he was having of like, how do we fund travel, shows, the band, whatever. What if there was a way to support artists in a way that didn't rely on YouTube or shows or whatever? Here's a way to support independent artists. We'll make a platform called Patreon where you can be a patron of your favorite artists. And that's how, I mean, I'm simplifying, of course, but this guy started as a practitioner and has continued on doing that. So I think his perspective is really informed. It almost
And
feels
it's I mean, he obviously touched on a true insight because now Apple Podcasts has a Patreon clone built into it. YouTube has a Patreon clone built into it. Substack was built based on the same philosophy. So he was ahead of his time.
it almost feels weird to me that he's a CEO because he doesn't have a CEO vibe. He has the guy who's got his arms, his shoulders or sorry, his sleeves rolled up and he's just doing the thing and happens to be the CEO of Patreon, but he's making the content. He's, building the platform and yeah, I don't know. It's just you're going to love this podcast guaranteed.
All right, dope. All right, one quick thing. Take us 1 minute to get through before BPC here. A new job of the year? Job of the week?
Whoa.
Job of the month? Kyle Siegel's hiring a director of operations at Raid. No longer a one-man band. It looks like Kyle's bringing on a right-hand man, or woman for that matter, at Raid Research. Did you
Very
see
cool.
that?
I did. In fact, it was in the Second Nature newsletter this past week.
It's pretty cool. Pretty big deal, right?
It's in the Slack channel jobs board, or we have a
Yeah.
channel within the Second Nature Slack. And actually that
I hope a
posting
second naturalist secures that job.
would be pretty cool.
That would be pretty fire. Bring things full circle, wouldn't it?
It wouldn't be the first second naturalist to swoop a job. based on our recommendations. Just saying.
What? Can
Yeah.
you break any news here on the program, or is it confidential?
No, no. I mean, I think one of the original posts, right? We had Drew Hartman get the
Oh, right.
Solomon job.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
we're just
I
helping.
don't think we can take credit for that, unfortunately.
I have a Slack message from him where he said we can absolutely take credit.
All right,
So we're
that's
good.
all us, all us, making dreams come true. Shout out Hartman. I heard you BPC his small brand.
Yeah.
What is it? Small brand energy or
Uh, small brand mentality.
small brand mentality?
Yeah.
Yeah. Shout out Drew Hartman.
Yeah.
He's a homie.
I love the concept behind it too, where it's like it's not a playbook, it's a mentality. You can't
Yeah.
just,
He sent me one of his hats too. So
yeah. I've been wearing it quite a bit actually. I kind of dig it.
yeah, it fits well. It's nice.
The other good thing about the raid job being in the Second Nature Slack channel is that it finally motivated Kyle to jump in as well. So Kyle is now in the Second Nature Slack channel with give or take 700 other people, all hitters from the outdoor industry. So
I haven't seen the introduction come through yet. Is it really official until you do the introduction?
I don't know. I don't think so. I think the introductions get so heavy. Like, oh, I'm this founder and CEO of this company. I don't know. There's so many banger introductions in there. It's got to be sort of intimidating. But I love knowing where everybody's coming from, and I know because I get an email for every single person that joins. I know who's in there, and I know who's sort of like lurking. It's pretty fascinating to see the talent that's there. But you know what? The conversations that are happening there, I think the introductions really sets off a lot of those sort of side discussions. And if you don't do the introduction, it's really hard to get in front of everybody. I think everybody does read all the introductions. And so basically, I think the flow is you introduce yourself, the handful of people that have an immediate interest in connecting jump into the DMs with you, and you're off to the races from there. And the more you contribute, of course, the better. But I think that's a really important element for anybody that's new to the Second Nature Slack channel.
Hell yeah. Brand, product, content. Can I go first?
Absolutely.
All right. I was in Boston the last couple of days. I was hanging out with my boy Doug Emsley. He owns Raccoon Media Group, which owns the Boston Run Show. Doug is a 30-year veteran of the conference and trade show industry. I peppered him with so many questions about that business, and eventually we're going to get him here on the podcast. Doug is, of course, one of our partners on TrailCon, and he's just become a really good friend. And I was there. I did a little talk on stage, but more or less, I was just there to check out this scene, hang out with Doug a little bit, and just kind of walk around and check out some of the products. So I just wanted to give shine to a couple of small brands who I interacted with at the Boston Run Show. And they also, it's actually called now the Boston Run and Outdoor Show. So there's an outdoor component to it also. And this hoodie that I'm wearing right now, Lucy, and for those who are not watching, I got sort of like a yellow fleece hoodie on, super cozy. It's from this brand called Bergeon Outdoor, which, as I understand, is about a 12-person operation from New Hampshire. So they're New England homegrown local brand to the region that I was just hanging out in. At their booth at the Run and Outdoor Show, they had somebody on the sewing machine sewing these things together. So you could pick out like different colors. So, for example, you can make the hood one color, the body of it one color, the kangaroo pocket a different color. I just got the full monocolor yellow off the rack. But I just sat and chatted with the guys there for a little while. And it's just like, I just have so much respect and appreciation for these small brands, especially who are like, go out of their way to go to the local trade show to just engage the community a little bit, to go above and beyond to bring the sewing machine and actually make some custom hoodies while they're there. So shout out Bergeon Outdoor. And then the second brand I wanted to give a shout out to, this may be the most fire piece I've bought in the last couple of years. The brand is called just Kona Brand, thekonabrand.com. And again, for those who are not watching, this is a Hawaiian floral print flannel. Hawaiian shirt flannel I am maybe the world's biggest fan of flannel shirts. As soon as I saw one with Hawaiian print, I was like, I'm buying two of them. Here's my other one, Lucy. And I chatted with the founder, who I would guess is like 27 years old. And we just like were chit chatting about it because Free Trail, we're trying to like figure out a lot of our product stuff right now. And so he was sharing a bit of, his advice on it. And anyway, we exchanged emails and stuff. And I might even try and get a commission a set of Free Trail branded flannels from this guy eventually. So I just wanted to give a shout out to these two local brands from New England, Bergeon Outdoor and the Kona brand, thekonabrand.com. I'm really they're the only people I bought product from at the trade show.
Big
So
statement.
shout out. Yeah.
Wait, is the Kona brand from Hawaii, or is it just a clever?
No. I said, are you guys from Hawaii? He goes, North Shore of Massachusetts, bro.
Oh
I
wow.
was like, let's go. Love it.
Wow. Wow. All right. Well, hey, it's got the vibe. That's fine. Flannel probably wouldn't sell that well in Hawaii, so I guess I get it.
I
But
mean, how fire is this shirt, Aaron?
the fact that it's flannel, like I can't really see it in the thing, but
Yeah,
up close, I'm sure it's pretty
it's
epic.
super cozy. Yeah.
Okay, I've got a BPC, which you and I were just talking about before we started recording, but I finally got my hands on these David bars. Oh my goodness. So, David bars, if you're not familiar, it's a protein bar. It's the guy who founded and ended up selling RX Bar to Kellogg for like $600 million. Waited out his non-compete and tried to figure out how to smash as much protein as you could possibly get into a bar possible. But what's really interesting is there's like no sugar in it, pretty low carb, pretty low fat. Like it's pretty much like all killer, no filler, and they taste good too. This is like I'm like your supplement sommelier over here, man. I'm trying everything, trying to what's the best protein bar, what's the best drink, what's the best gel gummy, whatever you like. I love experimenting with all that stuff, and I've gotten a few other ones recently that I've been testing out and trying. There's a new flavor from scratch that I just got my hands on that isn't out yet, but man, I really like these David bars. They're pretty delicious. I've got a variety pack on the way, but so far I've had the peanut butter chunk and the double fudge brownie. Yeah, both of them delicious so far. So I'm in more of a protein phase right now. I know a lot of runners are more in a carb phase, but yeah, this is the best protein bar I've found yet. So
Hell yeah. The
yeah,
David bar.
pretty good, man. They're delicious.
Taking the world by storm, it feels like.
Yeah, I think they had a big rollout, and they've gotten Peter Attia and Huberman and all these guys backing it pretty hard. So,
God.
yeah, I mean, you
Again,
got
creators or founders, right? I'm sure those guys have skin in the game, so to
yeah,
speak.
I would imagine so.
Yeah. Bro, we are so back.
Yeah. Yeah, man, I'm excited for TrailCon. I'm actually really looking forward to it. I've got it on my calendar, and like I've said to you a couple of times, like I'm not at any of these races or events. I guess between now and TrailCon, I will have been at Sea Otter, and so we will have a chance to meet some of the listeners to Second Nature in person. But mostly, I'm out in a field making bike videos, or I'm sitting in this office doing podcasts. I'm not really interacting with a lot of people en masse. So I think TrailCon and Sea Otter are going to be two of the big first opportunities to really connect. Although we have been doing a monthly meetup for Second Nature here in Portland, and we should talk about this because I know there's another one going down in Colorado. And if you're in the Slack channel,
I gotta start the subgroup for the Bay Area.
yeah. We had our first one a couple weeks ago, and it was super awesome. And it wasn't like a traditional like let's get together and exchange business cards. It was like let's get coffee together and just talk about the stuff we love. And the conversation went all over the place. There were enough people that there were a handful of conversations going on, and we'd kind of come back together. The next one that we're doing, which actually I think by the time this come out, we will have done it, but we're doing one on my birthday. And not only are we all going to get together, but we're going to do a book swap. So everybody's going to bring a book and exchange it with somebody else because I guess Ming was saying we're up to like, I think 34 or 35 books now that we've recommended over the last year of Second Nature. But it does seem like a lot of people listening are big readers. So I felt like doing a book swap was just the right thing to do. And actually don't know how it's going to go, but I think it'll be kind of fun.
Hell yeah, yeah. I gotta get the Bay Area community
Dude, the
engaged
Bay
here.
Area meetup, that's going to be a big one.
That'd be fire.
Yeah, there's a big group here in
How do I
Portland.
stand up a channel in there?
I'll
I
help you out.
just
I
all
got you.
right. Yeah. All right.
Stay tuned. Bay Area channel coming soon to Second Nature Slack channel.
Hell yeah, buddy. Lucy, so good to be back, buddy.
Yeah, welcome back.
Hell yeah. All right, everybody, go follow us on LinkedIn, newsletter, YouTube, Instagram,
Hang out in
local
Slack.
meetup, jump in Slack. Love you guys. Talk soon.